And meanwhile, the Chicago police were tipped off that a member of the Dillinger gang had put a car into a garage to have something fixed. So a detective went there to check it out, and he ran into Red Hamilton. Without hesitation, Hamilton pulled a gun and shot him dead. And which shows that, if Hamilton had to kill to remain free, he would do so.
Although Chicago was controlled by the mob, you still couldn't shoot a policeman for no reason. As a massive search for the killer was mounted, it was time for Red Hamilton and the other gangsters to hit the road and hide out in the southern states until things had settled down.
They had their girlfriends with them, and the women would go ahead and they would rent the places, and they would get food in. As you probably know, in those days, a gangster's girlfriend was called a mom.
Dillinger and Billy Frechette had a fairly close relationship, and she did break him out of jail once, but the rest were really girlfriends. They were add-ons. They were there more for convenience and also to use as a camouflage. And the sad thing is that in the end, the men had absolutely no compunction about abandoning them, leaving them behind.
You always had some things ready to go. You had money in your pocket just in case you had to bolt, and you were armed wherever you went. So it really was not an ideal way to live. There was nothing romantic or glamorous about it.
On New Year's Eve, Hamilton and the gang put their worries behind them and celebrated the arrival of 1934. But the coming year would be bloody and violent, and for many of them, it would be the last year they would see.
Dillinger and his gang, armed with machine guns, strode into the Merchants Trust and Savings Bank and stole $28,000. Then, they cut loose with their machine guns, killed the policeman, and wounded 4 bystanders.
During the bank robbery in East Chicago, a policeman, William Patrick O'Malley, was killed. The gang fled with the money from the bank, but Red was injured during the escape.
There has long been a dispute as to whether John Dillinger actually was at that robbery. J. Edgar Hoover blamed it on John Dillinger because he wanted the public to see that Dillinger was a killer as well as a robber. It seems more likely that it was Hamilton than somebody else. And Hamilton was wounded in the shootout, and he was convalescing in Chicago.
Dillinger was than new in Chicago for treatment. After a period of time, Hamilton wasn't strong enough to go back on the road, so a former girlfriend, Pat Cherrington, came to help him. Hamilton needed time to recover from his injuries, and in order to throw the police off the scent, Dillinger circulated stories to the press that Red had been killed. But Dillinger and the rest of the gang should have been covering their own tracks.
Some of the gang headed for Tucson, Arizona, and shortly thereafter, the police in Tucson became aware that members of the Dillinger gang were in their midst. And one by one, they caught Harry Pierpont, Fat Charlie, and Booby Clark, and then they caught Dillinger himself. And this would be the end of the line for Pierpont and Clark and Mackley.
It looked like it would be the end of the line for Dillinger too, unless he could get a message to the last member of the gang who was still on the outside, John Red Hamilton. Luckily for Dillinger, the cameras were never too far away.
The time that he was captured and taken to the Crown Point jail, if you ever get to see that bit of newsreel, you can see him sort of hamming it up a little bit for the camera. And there's a part where he puts his arm on the shoulder of, I forget if it's it's the governor of the state or someone, and he goes like this, and some people have interpreted that as a signal to his guys who might be watching this in a movie theater on a newsreel. This is, get me a gun. And it is believed that it was Red Hamilton who set things up for John Dillinger to break out of the Crown Point jail.
Dillinger escapes from Indiana jail after taking away pistol from guard with the point of a self-made wooden gun.
Trust Johnny.
This is the reason a man killer is free. He commandeers sheriff's own car. Take a Negro captive along on his flight.
Hey, he never does anything quietly.
Johnny's out.
Hamilton and Dillinger were together again, but with all their old gang members either dead or in prison, they needed to recruit some new faces. They decided to team up with Homer Van Meter and Babyface Nelson, an infamous villain known for being a psychotic killer, and they set off on another spate of bank robberies.
Red Hamilton was the only person who was actually a member of both Dillinger gangs. At that time, J. Edgar Hoover believed that Red Hamilton was the brains of the outfit.
J. Edgar Hoover was a master strategist, a master showman, politician. A lot of his moves, in retrospect, are extremely Machiavellian. He made the outlaws seem like a threat to national security. So, of course, he would have money, he would have all sorts of resources poured into their extermination. Outlaws were at a disadvantage in that they were the first American criminals to have their pictures, to have news of their exploits advertised in film. And the FBI and other law enforcement agencies made good use of that by broadcasting newsreels, so the outlaws were much easier to spot. The outlaws were forced to go from one place to another. They could never put down roots anywhere. There's an urban legend, who knows if it's true or not, that John Dillinger was standing in a backyard of property that they were temporarily staying at, and he had his hand against a tree and he was looking at it. And finally somebody said to him, "It's a tree, John. What are you looking at?" And he says, "All I can keep thinking is that this is the only thing here that has any roots." And he was right.
In April 1934, tired of constantly moving about, the gang decided to take refuge in an isolated lodge in Wisconsin called Little Bohemia. What they didn't know was that Hoover and the FBI had received a tip-off regarding their whereabouts, and the FBI were preparing to strike.
He did not inform the local police because he did not want to have to share the glory with them. So the FBI agents went in there not knowing the lay of the land. They did not have local police who could have told them that there's a back door out of this place and a trail through the woods where somebody could escape. The FBI agents did all the shooting, and they killed an innocent man and wounded another man. The outlaws went out the back window and they just took off. That was a huge embarrassment for J. Edgar Hoover. His men not only killed an innocent man, but they let all of the outlaws escape.
As the gang were making their escape through Minnesota, shots were fired at the car with Hamilton inside, and one of the bullets hit him in the back, leaving him almost dead.
Dillinger took Hamilton to Chicago. They tried to find an underworld doctor who would treat him, but by this time the Dillinger gang was so hot that nobody would have anything to do with them. They were bringing too much law and help on everybody.
The outlaws had thrown the heat not only on themselves, but on the organized criminals to an extent that the mob had just basically put out a blanket order to have nothing to do with these guys.
It is believed that John Red Hamilton Dillinger, they buried him in a grave outside Chicago. And within a few months, Dillinger, Babyface Nelson, and most of the second gang were all in hiding. However, the story doesn't end there. Because even to this day, controversy surrounds the death of Jim.